The Mobile County Public Schools presents Homeroom.
Hi, and welcome to Homeroom, where we introduce you to the educators and the students who make Mobile County Public Schools the best school system in the state of Alabama. I'm your host, Renee Phillips, and today we have an exciting show, and I think it's going to be very informative to our parents as we're going to learn about what our children are learning in school. We're going to talk math, English, science, but first, social studies. So joining me, I have Nate Smith, who is over our social studies and history programs throughout Mobile County. Hi, Nate.
Hey, Renee. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell us, why do we need to study history and social studies?
And, you know, whenever I get asked that question, I'm like, why not study history? You know, we always hear, and it's true that, you know, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And I just think that, you know, when you look at what's going on in the world today, I think I don't think any of this is a surprise. You can look back and you can see trends in history to see different things that have been going on and what's been happening in the world all around us. And if you're knowledgeable of those things, you know, I think we become better informed as, you know, as citizens or Americans to be able to better, you know, handle or deal with the challenges that we're facing in our country today.
So is history memorizing a bunch of facts and dates, or is it more analytical, or?
Well, that's an interesting question, Renee, because when I first started this position as an academic supervisor quite a few years ago, one of my goals and challenges was that I wanted to move us away from the drill and kill, the rote memorization, the recalling of facts when it comes to our history classes and lessons. It's far more important that we're teaching our kids to think critically on a higher order level, to be able to deal with a lot of the challenges we face. So I'm that type that says, hey, teachers, let's move away from the right and wrong answers. You know, the kids have computers, laptops, cell phones, tablets, all of those things. They can look up a lot of facts. And I tell them, hey, there are things that you just need to know. I understand that. But it is far more important, and I think teachers, we should take advantage of that opportunity to teach our kids to think independently, critically, analytically. And so that's the direction that we've been moving towards in our history classrooms.
And I love it. I have two boys in middle school, and last night we got to hear all about the causes of World War I. So it's neat that they can process it and think about it, and how do we not have a war like that again?
Right. And it's far, and instead of being able to say, hey, well, you know, the war started in 1914, the United States entered in 1917, it's more important to know why, or, you know, why was this the Great War? You know, and why was this actually considered the war to end all wars? And as you know, there were several wars to come along, you know, right afterwards. But instead of just memorizing, hey, there was World War I, you know, it's far more important for them to be able to talk about it, draw conclusions, tie things and make connections, you know, from that war, you know, to things that's happening in the world today.
Oh yeah, we talked about which countries aligned with which countries. It was very interesting. So walk us through history and social studies. Do we start in kindergarten and work our way up, or how does that work?
Believe it or not, we do. We start in kindergarten, and when we start at that grade level, we're talking a lot about and teaching the kids more about living together, working together, community-oriented activities, what things look like as a community and a household, you know, a country, and then we just kind of progress from kindergarten, because it may be like, hey, community, and we may think of, you know, talk about those things as far as the community, but we progress to saying, hey, neighborhoods, counties, states, or whatever. So it goes on, but then it gets a little bit more serious. Not that the others are not, but when we get to the third grade, we start looking at more like geography and history. Fourth grade, Alabama history. Fifth grade, U.S. history, along with sixth grade. Seventh grade, we do civics and geography. They do a semester of civics and then a semester of geography. and then ancient world history in the 8th grade, modern world history in the 9th grade, and then we do U.S. histories again in our 10th and 11th grade, and then round it up with government and economics in the 12th grade.
So all important topics, and then there's a civics test.
Yes, the all-important civics test. You know, several years ago, our state legislatures passed a law requiring that kids be able to pass a civics test as a graduation requirement. So now as a requirement for graduation, all of our 12th graders, our seniors, take a test that's very similar to the citizenship test that someone who is seeking citizenship in our country would take. It's 100-item test, and a lot about, you know, America and American history, things of that nature. And our kids take that test and very successful. We have very high success rates from our seniors in every school, high school, on that test.
So they're learning civics, they're learning government.
Yes, exactly. And like I was telling some parents in the communities or whatever, I'm like, okay, when you're out on the street and some comedian approaches you and asks you, you know, how many states there are, how many stars are on the flag, if you can't tell them it's not our fault, you learned it in school.
We've taught them multiple times.
You get it in elementary, middle, and high school, so it's not our fault. Don't look at me.
I love it. I love history. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what all of our social studies and history teachers are doing throughout the district to help our children to be better citizens and to be more knowledgeable.
Oh, thank you, Renee.
So we had to break for commercial, but when we come back, we're going to learn more about what Mobile County Public Schools is teaching in English, math, and science. So stay tuned for Homeroom.
When parents are involved in school, you get more of this and less of this.
Hi, and welcome back to Homeroom. Today we are learning about what our children are learning about in school. And joining me, I have Dr. Kevin Balius, who is over ELA.
That's right.
Tell us, what is ELA?
So ELA, not many people know, but it means English Language Arts. So it encompasses all of the writing, reading, speaking, and listening skills that we want our students to get proficient in.
And those are so important. No matter what they're going to go on and do with their lives, isn't it important to read and write? And
one of the reasons I love this subject is because it's the very foundation. So we get children, and we learn to read, and then we switch to reading to learn. And watching that light bulb transition when a kid first unlocks that code and can read the text is an amazing experience, and one of the best parts about this.
I have so much admiration for the teachers who teach children to read. That's a miracle. You watch it from step one until they're reading entire books and chapter books.
It really is, and it's a exercise in patience until they get the letters and then blend the sounds, and then they can put the sentences together. It's just a beautiful thing.
So we hear a lot about third grade and how important the third grade is, because that's when it shifts from the learning to read to reading to learn.
That's right.
Basically. And we have this Alabama Literacy Act. So do you want to tell us
Yes.
about that?
So the Alabama Literacy Act is a piece of legislation that requires that all students are proficient in reading by the end of third grade. So with that particular piece of legislation, we have certain critical areas where students have to demonstrate proficiency. So when they take the ACAP, which is the Alabama Comprehensive Assessment Program, it's a mouthful, but when they take that at the end of third grade, we then pull out those specific standards and look at the score on those standards. So just because they may not be proficient on the overall test, we're looking at, did they score sufficient enough on these specific standards? And that's that sufficiency score data that was released, I think, early this year, maybe late summer.
And that's a state law, correct?
Absolutely. That was enacted by the state legislation, and then our State Department of Education has worked diligently to try and make sure that teachers are able to do this, and it's done effectively so all of our children are supported.
And what people may hear is that if you don't pass the test by the end of your 3rd grade year, you don't go on to 4th grade. But it's so much more than that, isn't it? Like, we're working every day to make sure they have those skills.
Yes, we have so many things in place. There are multiple pathways for students, so they can demonstrate proficiency on the ACAP. They can have a Literacy Act portfolio that allows us to track the performance on those specific skills, because let's say a particular student doesn't test well. That student can still demonstrate proficiency through a portfolio. And we provide teachers with all the things that can go in that portfolio to help demonstrate that skill level. The Literacy Act itself allows for students to be proficient readers, and then supports teachers in helping that happen by helping them target intervention. And that's where our student reading improvement plans come in. Each student who has a demonstrated deficiency in reading, one of the skills, we give them a specific reading plan that we monitor throughout the year to make sure we fill in those gaps. And that's been especially important after the COVID-19 pandemic.
So teachers are constantly evaluating their students, finding out what their weaknesses are and helping them. And I've seen one of the fun programs that you've done to do that is the summer literacy camps.
Oh yes,
So tell us about
we are
those.
very proud of the summer literacy camps.
They're so fun.
They are. Our kids love them, and props to our schools because they really take it on and design those themes, and to our teachers who come back during the summer and do this as well and help support our kids. So students who have demonstrated deficiencies are invited, and we try to open it up to as many children as possible. And we work with those kids on their specific needs over the summer, and that helps mitigate that summer loss and helps support them in those areas so they can be proficient by the end of 3rd grade.
And they have fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've had everything from extra field trips to pizza days, anything that gets the kids excited.
And I've talked to some of the kids, they're there through the month of June and they want to come back in July. We're like, no, you get a summer, we'll see you in August.
Yeah. Our teachers need that little bit of break in July, but they want to stay, and we would love to have them.
So they're doing that through elementary school, they're becoming proficient readers, and then they're writing and they're analyzing. So tell us, how does that progress as they go up into middle and high school?
So once we get into middle school, we're really reading to learn. We have some things in place so that way if we're still struggling a little bit with reading, we can support. But most of those courses have students working with complex text and complex language and really taking it apart to identify themes, textual evidence that support those, and draw conclusions and make inferences. And then they can translate that skill into their writing. So we read all of these mentor texts, and then in our writing we can take what we read and recreate that structure, and it really helps students become more critical thinkers, because when we're writing we have to really play with the idea, and when we're playing with that idea we can then write and understand it at a higher level.
And then you make it fun. There's some new state standards where they can create videos, do a playlist, like summarizing the scenes from a book with a song. Like, tell some of the cool things that they're doing.
Absolutely. So what I really love about our new standards is there is a section on digital literacy and some new standards on research literacy in that secondary. And it allows students to demonstrate understanding by creating a podcast and doing sort of what we're doing now and filming like an interview setting. We've had students make comic book strips that are digital, like graphic art. It's been really, really interesting watching the students and how creative they can be. But what's most important is this also prepares them for later in life, because we don't just write for paper and for a teacher. We want them to write so that way they can share that knowledge and share what they're learning and really engage in what they're passionate about.
And they're still learning those skills. They're still doing the essays with the thesis and the 3 points and all that.
Absolutely. We still have the 3-pronged thesis and all of those important cornerstones to what we do. We've just added that extra layer of how do I now communicate my ideas.
Right, checking for understanding in their creative ways. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you to all our ELA teachers throughout the district. We have to break for commercial, and when we come back, we're going to learn about math. So stay tuned for Homeroom.
High school students, are you looking for a way to become a better leader? Then the Junior Officers Training Corps may be what you're seeking. If you would like to develop self-reliance, learn ways to be more responsible, and improve your communication skills, you can do that and more when you register for the Junior Officers Training Corps. The JROTC program is available to all high school students in Mobile County. JROTC, we build a better you.
Hi, and welcome back to Homeroom. Today we're learning about what our children are learning about in school. We've heard from our social studies and ELA supervisor, and now I have Kyle Bernie Lamar, who's over that word that's scary to very many people, math.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll just be very candid with you. Even when I was a student, I was afraid of math. And it wasn't until actually I took a chemistry class that I was comfortable with even doing and performing equations. So it's a journey for everyone. And I had a professor in college that always said, and I didn't get it until later on, that math is a grown-up subject.
Yeah.
And now I get that, and you have to have a particular mindset in order to really, really understand and enjoy math. And that's what we want to build in our students, that capacity to enjoy math and get over some of those fears that they are accustomed to because of what people tell them, and allow them to get their own understanding and comprehension of the subject.
So be patient, because one day you too may enjoy math.
Absolutely.
And what we hear a lot about from parents is they don't understand the new math, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
So what do you say to those parents?
There's no new math.
Okay.
There's just a new way of looking at things in our elementary schools, and that's what the target is. That's where it becomes a little difficult for some parents, because they're not able to help the students as much as possible. But it's just because in elementary, we're looking for them to be able to conceptualize the math as opposed to just the skill and drill of the math. And if they can get the basic understanding that why we do the things that we do, why is addition the way that it is, why is subtraction the way that it is, and so on, then you better understand it when you get to the procedural part of the math.
And I've noticed that with my own children. I don't know how they figure out the problem, but they seem to understand numbers better than I did.
Absolutely, because now students are being asked to derive numbers. Why does 2 plus 2 equal 4?
Yeah.
You know, and when we did it back in the day, it was a very simple concept. 2 and 2 gives you 4, and you hold up fingers and everything like that to demonstrate. But now it's what's the logic behind it? And when we're building those students' logic behind that math, then they better understand it.
And what I've noticed too is they understand more into like the fractions, the percentages, even some algebra that they're doing early on, then they don't realize it's algebra.
Absolutely. And so the new course of study now uses that language that we're learning even in kindergarten, algebra. And so it's releasing some of that fear that students have when they get higher up into the math courses, because they know they've been doing it this entire time. And especially that F word, fractions, you know, that's where everybody jumps. And so your third grade is a very critical grade for us, because they start to be introduced to fractions, and the way that they look at them and break fractions down really help the students understand it when they get to where they have to apply using those fractions in the higher level math courses.
And in the word problems and all those.
Absolutely. And so, and that's the big push now in our secondary setting, is making sure that we're connecting that real world to those concepts that they learned in the elementary setting. So a lot of word problems, but not just the word problems themselves, but dissecting the word problems. So a lot of times the ELA and the math work hand in hand, because they have to be able to comprehend what's in the word problem in order to perform the math that's being presented.
And that makes it relevant,
Yes,
because you may not do a fraction equation, but you're going to have to measure wood to build a fence one day, or for practical purposes.
And I'll tell you, with our new textbook adoption with HMH, they have built in a lot of that everyday stuff, things that students can really see. Even with our Math 180 program, in that is built in where they can make connections to jobs that are related to using math, and it opens their eyes to realize that math is all around us, and there's no way I can really get away from it no matter what career field I go in.
Yep, you will have to budget, you will have to build things. And so we've had a big change in the way that we do math in high school.
Absolutely.
Coming from the state. So tell us about that. We've switched the order of algebra and geometry.
Yes. So traditionally we were Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and a specialized course beyond that. Well, the state thought that, and logically so, that geometry should come first, because that gap in between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 traditionally caused issues, whereas students learned a lot of content in Algebra 1, then went to geometry and didn't use most of that content, and then got to Algebra 2 and needed to apply a lot of that content from Algebra 1. It just made more sense to move geometry since it's more of a independent subject than the rest of them.
And it makes sense, because I think sometimes I'm thinking, well, I took algebra, geometry, and then algebra 2, and we think it should always be that way. But
That's
it actually
right.
makes sense that now the algebras are next to each other
That's
and the
right.
geometry is first.
Right, because now the students are seeing the real continuation between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, especially with our textbook adoption and the books, the products that we bought. It gives that, it's more of a part 1 and part 2. So when they go into the next class, they're more comfortable with learning the materials because it all builds on each other.
Is geometry still proofs?
Geometry is still proofs.
I remember that. And I know you're doing some things that make math fun. I got to go to the math competition for 5th grade last year.
Yes,
That
yes.
was awesome. So tell us about
I
that.
tell you, if you've ever been to a sporting event, it has nothing on the 5th grade math competition.
The mathletes.
Yes, the mathletes. They were so excited, and to see parents, students, community excited about math really brought a joy to my heart, because you don't often see that. And so because of that, this year we're planning to expand a little bit and put some more grades on there. We're looking at incorporating the 8th grade and seeing what those kids know, and just to get that and build that morale there, because to give them something to look forward to, because not every student is going to be an athlete, and more students are thriving in the academics, and they want to be able to showcase what they know. And those special students that are math people, they want to be able to showcase what they've learned in their math classes. So
It was so
giving
fun.
all students that opportunity.
And it was fun. They cheered their teammates on. My son was
Absolutely.
participating. His shirt said, "You have to be odd to be number 1."
Absolutely.
Which I thought was great. But
I agree with that.
They celebrated intellect, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And that's what we want with our students. We really want them to be able to showcase what it is they're learning in all areas of their learning.
So don't be afraid of math. Be excited for
Be
math.
excited for math. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for what you do and for what all of our math teachers do throughout the district. We have to break for a commercial. And when we come back, we're going to learn about science. So stay tuned for Homeroom. Hi, and welcome back to Homeroom. Today we've been learning about what our children are learning about in school. We've heard from our supervisors over social studies, over ELA, and math. And now we have science, which to many people is the most exciting subject.
It is. It is the best subject and the funnest subject.
So what makes science fun?
Just being able to do science, and that's one of our initiatives that we have with our district, is we don't want them just to learn the facts. We want them to do what a scientist does. So that includes hands-on learning, labs, manipulatives, anything where they can be immersed in the science.
And it is fun when you go into a classroom and see that. I was at Lott Middle School and they were examining pond water to see if they saw organisms in it, like from their community. So is that the kind of
Absolutely.
activities that we're doing in our classrooms, is hands-on?
Yes, and we want them to see science is all around them. So if they can figure out how science works in the real world, in their life, that helps the students better understand it, and that will help them when they get to be older and, you know, just be a productive citizen.
And it starts young.
It does. We start science in kindergarten, and they're learning the same type of standards that our middle school and elementary and high school students are learning.
Okay. Some of it's the scientific method. They're having theories, or I'm using the wrong word, right? But
Well, they do
hypotheses.
Yes, and they go through the different processes in order to learn the content. And that's pretty much based on how our standards are set up. There's 3 dimensions to our standards: the science and engineering practices, disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. And the best thing about those is it makes them more rigorous. It's not just about memorizing, but those science and engineering practices, they get to do what a scientist does. So they're developing and using a model. They're planning and carrying out an investigation. They're asking questions. And so that's where the rigor part of those standards, and that's where the fun part is too.
And as a teacher, don't you love when they ask questions?
Absolutely. And we want the kids to develop their own questions and not just the teacher giving them questions, but what do they want to know? Because if you spark interest in what they want to know, they'll learn it a whole lot better.
Yeah, and even starting in kindergarten, I've seen them with those little coding robots. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Even in our kindergarten, we start with robotics, and we do that throughout elementary, middle, and high school, and it progresses as they get older. But even in kindergarten, they work with B-bots or Ozobots, which are smaller robots, and they can code those robots to touch a certain letter or go through a maze. And so they're getting those foundational skills that they need. And robotics is not just about that skill, but it's helping them with problem solving, critical thinking, and also incorporating the engineering part.
And teamwork, because they'll get together and compete with these robots in middle and high school.
Absolutely. We have a competition in Mobile County for robotics for elementary and middle school using the VEX IQ robot. We had a competition last year, and we're having another one this year, and we're doubling the size because we had so many more students who wanted to participate, and it's like a football game for robotics.
It's in a gym and they're cheering on their school. And
absolutely. They have their team shirts on, they're showing their spirit, and the kids really love it. And that's what it's all about, is for the kids to love it.
And it's that problem solving, because I know they'll get a problem that they have to solve, like to clean out something in a waterway, so they build a robot that can function and do that. And then
absolutely.
They
with VEX IQ, they actually have an engineering-based challenge, and the students will have to move a ball or move disc out the way using their robots by coding and programming, and even driving the robots. So they're using a lot of skills during that.
So what types of science do we teach? I know biology, chemistry. Tell us how that looks for a student.
So in elementary, they have a combination. They're doing a little bit of earth science, life science, and physical science, building those foundational skills. When they get to middle school, in 6th grade, they do earth science. 7th grade, they do life science. In 8th grade, they do physical science. And high school gets a little tricky. If they're on a regular diploma, they do physical science and biology. And if they're on the honors track, they will start with honors biology and honors chemistry. And then everyone for their 3rd and 4th science gets to pick their science, which is great because they can cater it to their interests, whether they want to do environmental science, anatomy, earth science. We have lots of electives that will meet the needs of the students.
And that's fun when they can pick it out, right? Because even among science, it's such a broad thing. And people like maybe biology's for you.
Right.
Chemistry was not for me.
Right. I understand. That's okay.
And so this also, it helps with their thinking skills, their teamwork, their problem solving, but this is preparing them for careers eventually, right? There are lots of jobs in the science field.
It is. The STEM workforce is definitely looking for people. So doing these classes throughout elementary and middle and high school is building that foundation and also that interest to make them want to go into a STEM career. And there's so many different levels, whether it's through a trade or an engineering trade or a 2-year or a 4-year or beyond. There's options for everyone in the STEM workforce.
Because I'm always impressed when I ask students what they want to do when they graduate. A lot of them, it's not just a science career or a medical career. They're very specific. And these are careers I've never heard of before, but
absolutely,
they're on track to go do it.
They do. And we have a lot of courses in our high school that are catered to that, such as Project Lead the Way courses where they're doing biomedical engineering and opportunities that we never had. These students are being able to experience that while they're in school.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for what you do and for what all of our science teachers are doing. That's all the time that we have on Homeroom, but I hope you have learned about what our children are learning about so that will help you at home when you're helping them with their homework. So that's all the time we have. We'll see you next time on Homeroom.